So, hi everyone. I'm delighted to be here to be addressing this amazing organization. Very long, reputable history that you all have. I wasn't expecting much of a turnout today because I'm aware that there is an event taking place called the Super Bowl. And I don't think I'm much competition for the Super Bowl, but I'm thinking maybe some of the people here are not Super Bowlers. I'm not sure, but if you are, I hope I can give you a little bit of brain stimulation before you go off and sludge your brains with beer or whatever you do. Anyway, I'm not sure why I was invited to address this organization. I think my dear friends George and Beth and Mark also invited me. It is an honor to be here. I asked George, "What do you want me to talk about?" And he said, "Anything you want." And I said, "That's kind of dangerous to give someone as opinionated as me a microphone and say you can talk about whatever you want." So I did wrestle with what I should talk about today. I feel like I'm partly invited because I wrote a book. By the way, I have a copy to donate to the Freethought Society, and I will do that. And that book is about Iran. And so I guess the expectation was that I talk a little bit about Iran and what it was like to grow up in Iran. And so I am going to do that, but I also couldn't not talk about what's happening in America today. And so I've put those two things together in a very odd sort of way. But it's not that odd for me because I wake up every morning feeling like I'm back in the Islamic Republic. And I'm really not exaggerating when I say that. So I have been lying in my bed, thinking about all the many parallels that I see happening between the Islamic Republic and the current MADA USA. So if you can, yeah, it's kind of odd not to quick the slide myself, but if you do the next one. Okay. Okay, so this is the topic I came up with. I guess you all know that because it was announced. So it's Trump's America vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic. And the subtitle is the consolidation of power and how the powerful prey on the ignorant. So I will be talking about, obviously, Iran is a theocracy. There's no question about that. I believe that we have some elements of that taking root in this country too. So like I said, it is these eerie similarities that I'm seeing between the two places. For some of you, it might seem for some people, it might seem like a bit of a preposterous comparison because Iran is, am I talking into this thing? Yes, it seems to be. If I don't hold it up, can you still hear me? Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
I think if you hold the microphone close to your mouth, it'll work better.
I have to eat it.
And it's not loud, Evo. Oh, whoops. Yes. We need your feet. There you go.
How's that? Yes? No?
I think that if you move it this way, this here, it will be steadier.
Well, yes. And maybe like this would be good because
How's that? Yeah, that works. Okay. All right. So I was saying it's a bit of a preposterous comparison because Iran is, everybody recognizes as a very oppressive society, probably one of the least free societies in the world, probably one of the most backward societies in the world. That's how it's regarded. And we are regarded as the bastion of freedom and democracy in the United States. So it seems like not a meaningful comparison. But I hope that I will, not prove, but I hope that I will show you that some of these comparisons are actually, they're actually valid. There have been many comparisons between what's happening in the United States and other things, like, for example, Hitler's rise to power, okay? That comparison, I think, is very obvious. This one is a little less obvious. So, okay. So my thesis is, I'm an English teacher. So I feel like I have to have a thesis of sorts. I also feel like I have to have a slideshow because everywhere. What's that? Yes. See how much attention you're paying. No, I hope I don't get tested afterwards. I want the discussion afterwards to be an open discussion, not a Q&A. So I hope that happens. So my thesis is about dystopia, okay? I used to teach all kinds of dystopian novels, right, back when I taught English to high school students. And I'm sure you all know what the word means, but a dystopia is a society that appears to be perfect, okay? It appears to be a utopia. But when you scratch beneath the surface, you see all kinds of horrible things taking place. So my thesis is Iran is actually not a dystopia. Even though it's a horrifying place, we know it is, okay? But it's scarier here because what's happening that's eroding our freedoms and our just our democracy is very subtle. So I've put up a quote from Orwell about a boot stamping on a human face forever. That's Iran, but the United States is Project 2025. Clearly, those of us in this room are aware that this is happening, but the larger public, all those however many percent of people voted for Trump, are not so aware. And I think there's a lot of subtle things happening. So those three slogans, I think, apply to both societies. I don't know if you guys are familiar with 1984. It's one of my favorite books. But war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. They can be unpacked in many, many different ways. But war is peace obviously means that when you wage war, with foreign powers or within your own society, you keep people quiet, okay? Good example of that is currently Netanyahu. If he stops the war in Gaza, he'll be out of power, okay? I think we do that as a society. Iran clearly does that as a society. Freedom is slavery. Well, when you think you're free, you're actually a slave, okay? And the last one, ignorance is strength. The ignorance of the people is the strength of the government. Again, all of those things apply to both societies, as does that list of words there. I don't need to define them for you. I know you guys all know what they all mean. I think they apply to both societies. Okay, so again, the teacher in me, I've got a little outline here. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own background and why I have the authority, if you will, to speak about this topic. Then I'm going to do 9 comparisons that I find quite frightening. And then I'm going to do a brief reading from my book if there's time. I'm not going to make it too long. I have a terrible fear of being boring, so I don't want to drone on and on. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So, and I put this picture up because, like I said, we think of Iran as a primitive society. This is one of the many beautiful bridges in Iran. It was built in 1650. So, Iran has a very long history. Obviously, the oldest city in Iran is from 4000 BC. So we may think of it as primitive, but it's obviously rich in history. So, okay, so a little bit of personal background. I was born in Washington, D.C., American mother, Iranian father. They met at Duke University, but I was raised in Iran. So at age 5, my father yanked us all across the ocean and raised us in Iran. As you can see in this picture, I don't know what my mother was dressing us in. I'm sorry. I'm the one in the, well, we're all in weird bathing suits. But anyway, at the time, Iran was the Shah's Iran, and I lived in sort of Iran's answer to Leave It to Beaver, I guess you would say. It was a happy place, okay? Clearly, the Shah was corrupt. There's no question about that. I didn't know that as a child, but I later learned it. Slide. Yeah. Sorry. So in this next picture, you have a comparison of me and my siblings before and after the revolution. And so I'm the one with the transistor radio. I grew up straddling 2 cultures. I went to an American school for the first few years, and then I later switched to an international school. But I would have to wear a hijab at that age now. Okay, so at age 9, you have to start wearing a hijab. And obviously, I was not wearing one then. Oops. Am I still? Yes? Okay. Yeah, so the other picture obviously was from after the hijab mandate. And here, that's a picture of me at age 24 or so, right around the time the revolution started, and then my later ID cards, okay? And obviously the hijab to me, it was enforced very strictly by the morality police. And I've never been arrested for a hijab violation, but some of you may know that there was a women's movement that started in 2022 where a woman was taken into custody, and then later beaten to death for a hijab violation. She was actually wearing a hijab, okay, but she was wearing it too loosely, and that sparked the Women Life Freedom movement, which is actually the inspiration for my book. So anyway, yeah, I have been called, I've been taken aside and told that this part of me, between the scarf and the rupush, was my chest. Your sister, you're showing your chest, okay? So, yeah. So, all right, moving on. I'm going to do the comparisons now. So there are 9 of them. And I want a disclaimer here. I'm not going to be saying everything that needs to be said about Trump's America. You all, I mean, judging from the comments that started this talk today, you're all very aware of what's happening, and I don't have to teach you about it, okay? I'm also not going to be presenting a full picture of what's happening in Iran. I just thought the comparisons were interesting, and there are more. I could make more comparisons, but these are the 9 that I came up with lying in my bed at night. Okay, so the first one is the consolidation of power, okay? So one of the things that people have said about Iran for ever since the revolution is it's only one man and he's making all the decisions, okay? And, you know, Iran has a constitution, it has a parliament, it has a government structure, but all of it comes down to one individual, the supreme leader, which is currently Khamenei, okay? And no decision can be made that doesn't go through him. And I'm arguing that the same thing is happening in the United States, obviously to a lesser degree. And clearly, we do have a constitution, but I think we're seeing it put through a paper shredder on a daily basis. And obviously, when he's picking a cabinet that is completely loyal to him and going to do his bidding, and when he has absolute veto power or the power to sign executive orders, as he's been doing, some of which break laws, then I think we have consolidated, we have the consolidation of power. So I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Babe. Boop. All right, so the next comparison is protecting wealth and privilege. I'm really not doing very well with this microphone. Sorry.
Sorry. Let's see if we can go back. Uh-oh. There you go.
Yep.
There, good.
Okay, and widening the income gap. So the first picture I put up there, that's the Shah, all right? Interesting, the Shah, obviously, I'm going to make a confession here. I was very anti-Shah, and I was actually very pro-Khomeini, okay? When the revolution I was 23 at the time, and I thought that Khomeini was he was anti-imperialist. He was going to return Iran to its original, I don't know, its original self. And I grew up watching horrible abuses of power, political prisoners, including some family members, and this opulence of the Shah. And I put that picture up because I thought the picture on the right is Mar-a-Lago, and I couldn't help but notice the differences, some similarities. So we thought when we were overthrowing the Shah, and like I said, I was part of that movement to overthrow the Shah. We thought that we were going to be getting rid of all this concentration of wealth. Instead, the opposite has happened, okay? So Khamenei, the supreme leader, he controls a vast financial empire. They seize land and make it government land, and they have oil revenue, obviously. And the numbers are just staggering. The numbers in the United States, I'm sure some of you, I've looked these numbers up multiple times, and I keep getting different figures. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk, wealthiest man in the world, okay? I believe that his fortune is something like $900 billion. Does that sound right to everybody? Okay? And then I think the top 10 or 11 cabinet picks for Trump together constitute a fortune of $350 billion, okay? In contrast, I think Biden's top 11, cabinet officials had $118 million. That's the figure that I came up with. So huge difference there. Not to mention how much money these people have raked in just since Trump got elected, okay? So there's also I heard someone mentioning Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a personal hero of mine. He always talked about the top, this percent versus that percent. So the top 1% of Americans own 30% of the wealth. In Iran, it's very similar. The top 1% of Iranians own 23% of the wealth. So, and you have to argue that there really can't be democracy when that's happening. And we all know that those people, those oligarchs or whatever, are not going to be fighting for us. So again, I'm not telling anybody here anything you don't know, okay? But I think the comparison to Iran is quite startling. I also looked up what it's believed it would take to end world hunger, okay? I know that ending world hunger isn't an overnight thing. It's not that easy. But it's estimated that it would take somewhere between $8 and $20 billion. So Elon Musk could end world hunger 200 times over, okay? Okay, that's one. All right, so propaganda, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. I know you guys know about this. Iran's media is state-run, okay? So we know that we are getting the government side of a story, okay? If anybody tries to veer away from the official, I don't know, government's line on whatever the issue might be, they can be jailed. And many journalists have been jailed. You'll see that media tower there is one of the tallest in the world. That's in Tehran, and it is where the Islamic broadcasting system is housed. Okay, so it's state-run media. Okay, here supposedly it's not state-run media, but is it or isn't it? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, our media, I don't know what the percent is. Help me out here, maybe Mark, maybe you know. How many people watch the Fox News? It's like, I mean, it is by far the most widely watched of all the news channels. Am I right? Yeah? I mean, second in line is MSNBC. But anyway, and then Trump has his personal megaphone everywhere, not just him, but all of them. So, and none of this consolidation of power and wealth would happen without propaganda. And we got it. Okay, we think of ourselves as not being victims of propaganda, but we definitely have it. So. Okay, so this is of particular importance to me because I am an educator. Okay, and I almost every day I feel like crying at what is happening in education in this country. In Iran, again, so I worked at the Ministry of Education in Iran for a while, and I'll never forget one incident where I was helping to write textbooks, and they gave me a text, and they wanted me to edit this text. So the text said that Adam, of Adam and Eve, from the Garden of Eden, which Muslims also accept Adam and Eve, spoke Arabic. And I was supposed to print that. Okay. So again, it's so egregious there that it's obvious, and everyone knows that they are being fed a bunch of lies, or they're being fed propaganda in these textbooks. It's all obvious. In the United States, though, it's a lot more subtle. So you'll see there a textbook from Texas, okay? This is just heartbreaking to me. They teach the Harlem Renaissance, but they question the value of the literature from the Harlem Renaissance. And there's a line in there that actually says that, okay? Then there's the book banning. I mean, how can we justify a free society banning books? 10,000 of them last year. Okay. And then we've got, this is thanks to you, Dana. She sent this on to me. We've got J.D. Vance calling universities the enemy. Okay. Coming right out and saying universities are hostile organizations that teach ridiculous, that spread and teach ridiculous lies or whatever. And they're going after the part of education. It's going to be dismantled. We're going to have, it's going to be privatized. I have no idea what they are thinking of doing, but clearly it's not going to be good for the, I don't know, for the declining the reading ability and the declining everything else that you can see there. U.S. ranks 125th in literacy. 54% of Americans between 16 and 74 read below a 6th grade level. Sad. Okay. All right. Next. So this obviously deserves a talk in itself. And this, I think, I'm sure all of you here are very, very aware of this, what your society is devoted to. So I don't, I'm again preaching to the choir here. Pun, example. Again, in Iran, everybody knows it's a theocracy. They don't make any bones about it, okay? When I did teach, I taught at the university and I worked at the ministry, and I was supposed to go to Friday prayers. I never did, but I had to kind of pretend like I did. I had to kind of pretend like I fasted in Ramadan because it was sort of an expectation, okay? That's not supposed to happen here. Okay, we are supposed to have a separation of church and state, but I feel that that's, I don't know, do any of the rest of you feel that way? That that's no longer going to be the case? We've got Trump there holding the Bible upside down, pretending to be religious. And we've got people worshiping Trump as though he were the second coming, okay? And then we've got religion just encroaching into every aspect of our lives. The Ten Commandments being posted on the walls of classrooms. Okay, so I don't know if we're becoming a theocracy, but Project 2025 has got a lot of religious, framework to it. So, okay, next. Okay, so this may not be a very popular thing to say. My personal feelings about patriotism are probably different from the average Americans. I don't like patriotism. I think patriotism is a disease. Okay, it seems to me that when you're patriotic, you're automatically saying you're better. Okay, and so I taught my children not to stand up for the pledge. That may sound unpatriotic, which it is. Okay, and I actually had to tangle with school authorities the whole times about that. But and I grew up in a country that was somewhat patriotic also. Iran was very patriotic. We had to stand up for the national anthem if we went to the movie, or we'd be kicked out. You wouldn't be able to, yeah. And to me, there's not that much difference between pledging allegiance and doing this. Sorry, I won't do it, but you know what I mean, okay? So that's sort of my own perspective on patriotism. But patriotism before MAGA was one thing, and it's another thing altogether now. Okay, I mean, if the Capital Six rioters can be called patriots, then say no more, right? And in Iran, that's the morality police there. Oops, you went. Oh no, yeah, that's the morality police. There it is. So there they are. They're women and men, morality police. So to be a good Iranian citizen and patriot, you have to arrest your fellow humans. Okay, sometimes violently, and you take them in and beat them. And so, no, we're not beating people here yet. Yeah. Right? You didn't. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that protesters would be gunned down in this country if that happened. Not to be too alarmist, but it has happened before. But anyway, so patriotism now belongs to MAGA. That's it. You're not a patriot unless you are on that side, right? Does any of you feel that way? I mean, that you no longer are a true American. Okay, so. All right, next. Okay, so again, this one is a topic in itself. And I thought about making my whole talk about this because the erosion of women's rights that's taking place in the United States, and trans rights, and LGBTQ rights in general is horrifying. We're seeing it every single day, okay? Again, in Iran, believe it or not, in Iran, gender-affirming surgery is allowed, okay? Even in Iran. In fact, the government offers money for it. They do say that being transgender is a mental illness, but they recognize transgender people. But look what's happening here with that. Not to mention what's happening with women's rights. I mean, there's not enough room on a screen to put it all up. Okay, so in Iran, obviously, there's no question. They're forcing women in Iran to wear a hijab. So we know that that women are being repressed. But here, again, it's more subtle. We've got this whole trad wives movement. Do you guys know what that is? I've just learned about it recently, and it's pretty scary, right? And we've also got a lot of sexual predators in our government, and no one seems to care, okay? In the middle there, you can't really see that. That is from the Department of Transportation, and it is a memo saying that more money should be given to parts of the country with higher marriage and birth rates. Yeah. So again, lots of subtle ways in which women are just being expected to be like in A Handmaid's Tale, okay? No one's telling us what to wear yet, but maybe they will. Who knows? Anyway, yeah. So again, you all know this. I do feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but it's just again the parallel there. Okay. All right. Okay, and then hatred. I think we love to hate as a society. We've hated so many people. We hated the Japanese, we hated the Vietnamese, we hated the Chinese, we hated the Muslims, we, currently hate the Jews. I don't know, we hate very well. We start hating our neighbors. That's really scary, okay? In Iran, you're taught to hate the United States and Israel. And it's, it's preached from the pulpit, and you're supposed to hate them. That makes you a good Iranian. But here, look at all the things we hate and fear, socialism being one of them. I know, Dana, you and I have talked about this a lot. It's possible that without that fear of socialism, Trump might not have won, but people were truly afraid of that. And if you ask any of those people, what does socialism mean, they would not be able to tell you. They can't define it, okay? Clearly, ICE raids are about hate and fear, okay? Clearly, firing inspector generals is about hate and fear. There's just all kinds of hate and fear. So, next slide. Okay, and then lastly, controlling again through fear and a fear of punishment. And in Iran, they have public hangings, not very often, not as often as we might believe, but they do have them, and it's horrifying. We don't publicly hang people, although we are one of the few developed nations in the world that still has the death penalty, and who knows whether it might not be applied to some of the people who are currently being, I don't know, being targets of the vengeance campaign. So, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I've been scared a few times lately. I've been scared when I've texted people things that are anti-Trump. I was a little scared of making this presentation. Not really. I mean, they're not going to come after me, okay? I was very scared when I published my book because it is very anti-Iran. That's a very obvious thing to be afraid of. But here, who knows? Who knows whether you might not, for speaking your mind, lose your job at the very least. So, okay, so that's it. That's my spiel. That's my 9 scary comparisons. I don't know how I'm doing for time.
You're right on time.
Right. Okay, so I did want to read a brief segment of my book. Most people don't have the attention span to listen to somebody reading out loud, so I don't want to go on for too long. Right, Katie? Look at it. You doing it? Okay. All right. Well, this, and by the way, this is not a plug for my book. I am notoriously bad at self-promotion. Not good at it at all. But anyway, there will be a copy in that library if anybody's interested in reading it. So, the one, not from me, but I can tell you where you can go to buy one. Yeah, I'm not allowed to sell them myself. Yeah, I make $1.35 for every book that's sold. Okay. All right. I'll tell you how you can get one. It's on Amazon. Okay, so it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's widely available. So yeah. Yeah, you hate Jeff Bezos. Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, there are other places to buy it. Yes. So you can. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk afterwards. Okay. All right, so this book was inspired by the woman life freedom movement, which I had talked about before, where a woman named Mahsa Amini in 2022 was arrested and then for a hijab violation. Then she was savagely beaten, and she kind of became the George Floyd of Iran, if you will. So she sparked an entire movement that spread, which some of you are probably familiar with it. It spread throughout the world. It was spoken about at the UN. It became a huge thing. And it has, unfortunately, died down. But as I'll show you at the end of this presentation, women are still rebelling in Iran, and they are very bravely doing so because they could be taken in and beaten to death, or they could be gunned down. Some of them are standing in front of tanks and saying, shoot me, okay? My late father was an OBGYN from Iran, so he worked with Iranian women, and he always said, it's going to be women who are going to overthrow this government. And I sort of feel that might be true. But anyway, that's why I wrote the book. I was very inspired by that movement. The story I'm going to read from, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the book. And yeah, there's another one, next one. Yeah. Okay, so the story I'm going to read from is called Av, which means water. A little bit of background for this story. First of all, it's really personal to me because I'm not an Olympic swimmer by any means, but I do swim. And for every time I swim, my thoughts start flowing. It's where I get my inspiration for what I write. But I grew up going to the Caspian Sea, okay? And the Caspian Sea at that time was the Riviera. No, it was Iran's Riviera. It was a beautiful place. The water was clear, and you could wear a bikini, which I did in my youth, okay? this is the Caspian Sea now. Not only are women not allowed to swim in it, okay, they can swim, but they have to swim in full hijab, and there is a curtain separating. That's it. You see it. It sounds unbelievable. And just the incredible expense that a fence like that involves. But anyway, this Caspian is also very toxic right now. So I don't know if you want to go in it anyway. Oops, sorry, go back one more, sorry. Oh, no, yeah, go back a couple, sorry. Yeah. No, yeah.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you go back? Previous and then previous again. Okay, so yeah, I want to mention these two slides. So on the left, the woman in the front there is a good friend of mine. She was a medalist at the Asian Games in 1974. That's the Iranian, and she's currently a judge in Florida. So, but yeah, so that was what it was like to be as a woman, as a female swimmer back in 1974. On the right is another one of my personal heroes. Her name is Ilham Askari. She is a 44-year-old woman. I don't know how much swimming she's doing now, but she has broken many records for swimming with full hijab, okay? Adding 6 kilos to her weight. Wow. Okay. She's also broken a record for swimming the longest distance ever by any human being, handcuffed. So she swims with a message, and she still lives in Iran. I don't know if she's swimming anymore, but anyway, and she mentioned in the brief. And this is, again, women's sports in Iran today. First of all, women are not allowed to go to men's sporting events at all, okay? And obviously men are not allowed to go to women's sporting events. Again, that's the former basketball team, and this is the current basketball team. Iranian women athletes do compete internationally, but they have to do it in hijab. So in most sports, they would be at a great disadvantage, okay? So that's what they wear when they play basketball. Can't imagine how. Okay, all right. So I'm going to read a little bit from this story up. I'm not reading from the beginning. I'm reading from the middle somewhere. In the story, a young woman, she's 16. She goes to the Caspian with her family, okay? And she's not a swimmer. She's been in water, but she's never been swimming. But her grandmother was a medalist, okay? Her grandmother was a swimmer before the revolution. So, and I'm kind of skipping around. I hope it'll make sense. Okay. Even though she hasn't been in many bodies of water, water has always called to Minu. Next slide. Yeah, I'm just going to keep the next slide up while I'm speaking. There we go. Okay. The first word she learned to write as a child was ab, water. It is the word every child learning to read and write Farsi he gave with, because it is made up of the first 2 letters of the alphabet, Aleph and Be. To Minu, learning to write this word had a special kind of significance. She remembers feeling entranced by the way the 2 letters on the page seemed to suggest the shape of a body of water with a tree beside it. She's always loved the sound of the word, the way it can be rolled around in the mouth and held in the throat for a long time. She loves looking at pictures of the world's beaches on the internet and imagining herself there, standing on the shoreline. Whenever YouTube can be accessed, she watches videos of female swimmers. She's fascinated by their lithe, muscular bodies cutting gracefully through the water. At times, she almost feels she's inhabiting those bodies, inhaling and exhaling with the swimmers, gliding through the water herself. She's often wondered whether her fascination with water might come from something she carries in her genes. On the wall in the apartment where she lives with her parents in central Tehran hang 2 photographs of her grandmother, Nasrin Hashemi. As a child, Minu would stare at these photographs in awe and disbelief, trying to reconcile those images of her grandmother with the puffy-eyed, careworn woman she knows as Mamani. Whenever Mamani comes to visit them, she sits on the balcony smoking cigarettes and drinking endless cups of tea. How could Nasrin, the woman in the photographs, possibly be Mamani? The photographs are grainy enlargement that have yellowed slightly with age, but what they depict is unmistakable. One of them shows a young Nasrin, probably 17 or 18, huddled together with 4 other women who are around the same age. All of them are wearing green and white one-piece swimsuits and white swimming caps, and all of them are glistening with water droplets, obviously having just emerged from the pool. The other photograph is of Nasrin standing alone, her hands on her slender hips, wearing a tight floral one-piece swimsuit. In this photograph, she has no swim cap and the long, dark tresses spill around her shoulders. Both photographs are captioned Iranian National Women's Swim Team, Asian Games, 1974. When she grew older, Minu learned to read the captions and place the photographs on the timeline of Iran's history. By then, of course, her mother had explained to her that Momani had been a champion swimmer in the years before the revolution. Women were still allowed to swim in 1974, and they were even allowed to wear bathing suits just as women did elsewhere in the world. It was not considered sinful at the time for women athletes to display their bodies in front of men. Men didn't just watch female swimmers, they followed them, supported them, cheered them on, and coached them. Even now, at age 16, this seems unfathomable to Minu. She knows, of course, that everything was different before the revolution, that women wore miniskirts, went to nightclubs, danced and sang in public. In her classes at school, she's learned that these behaviors were part of Iran's West-toxication, its exposure to the decadence and corruption of Western countries, primarily the United States. What she's had difficulty fathoming is that her grandmother had once been so physically fit, so thin and muscular, so full of energy and vigor. Throughout Minu's life, Momani has always been wrapped in dark, loose-fitting clothing that hides the shape of her rotund body. In the photograph, Nasmin is proudly parading her body. If one looks closely, the contours of her breasts are visible in the picture, and there's even a suggestion of her nipples. Perhaps the most shocking thing of all is the brazen way Nasrin is looking at the camera, as if to challenge the photographer, who must surely have been a man. The Malani that Minu knows often casts her eye downward. Whenever Momani visits the apartment, she averts her eyes when she passes the photographs of herself. Minu has never heard her comment on them at all, except to mutter something like, Yadil Ruz Habechet, those were the good old days. Although she won't say so directly, Minu knows that it pains her grandmother to remember her years as a young woman who was free, not only to swim, but to go to discotheques and dance and laugh in the company of men. Although she never talks about her years as a swimmer, Momani follows the news about women's sports in Iran with great interest. A few years ago, she was outraged when she heard the story on the news about a female swimmer who swam for 8 hours along the Caspian seacoast, breaking a record. She broke the record while wearing 6 kilos of clothing, including a full wetsuit, a swimming cap, a scarf, and a cape covering the whole body. Her swim took place in a secluded part of the Caspian where there were no men present, and still, the authorities refused to register her time because her attire did not conform to Islamic norms. More recently, Momani was visiting when another heartbreaking news story came on television. A woman who was jailed for dressing like a boy and attending a men's soccer match set herself on fire in protest of her sentence, dying from the burns a few days later. Momani burst into tears, cursed at the television, and ran from the room. When she came out later to have her tea, her eyes were even puffier than usual, and her hands shook as she lit her cigarette. She took a deep drag, and as she exhaled, she mumbled, "Those bastards," through a cloud of smoke. Momani had an even stronger reaction when she heard a grand Ayatollah, an Islamic scholar, addressing the topic of female athletes during a television interview. The moment has lodged in Minu's memory because it was when she first realized how much anger her grandmother was carrying around. The Ayatollah insisted that women should not participate in sports such as weightlifting because it ruined their bodies and compromised their femininity. Minu remembers his exact words. "A woman who lifts weights is no woman," he said. "The integrity of a woman is defined by becoming a mother and nurturing her children." As she watched the interview, Momani shook her head in disgust. "Madar kahbe, motherfucker," she shouted on television. Excuse me. Then Minu, who had never heard her grandmother use such shocking language before, turned and stared at her. Momani made no apologies. She did not turn her eyes from the screen, but instead continued shouting at it. "You filthy dog. You call yourself a scholar? You call yourself a leader? Who are you to say what a woman should do with her body? Who are you to decide what is feminine and what is not?" Minu's parents invited Momani to accompany them to the seashore for this trip, but she declined. Minu cannot help but think that the sight of water fills her grandmother with sorrow and longing. It is less painful for her to stay at home drinking tea and smoking cigarettes. Okay, so this is from the very end of the story. On the last night they are in the hotel, Minu and her parents turn in early so they can be rested for the long trip back to Tehran. Lying in her single bed in the alcove, Minu cannot sleep. She doesn't toss and turn, but instead lies perfectly still for a long time, listening to the sound of the lapping waves mingled with the sound of her parents' gentle snoring. She doesn't know what compels her to get out of bed. It is not a rational or deliberate decision. Soundlessly, she pulls back the covers, swings her legs over the mattress, finds her slippers with her feet, and slips them on. Using the light of the moon to guide her, she walks over to the place where her rupush and headscarf are hanging, lifts them from the hook, puts them on over her pajamas. She opens the door gently, walks down the narrow hallway to the elevator, and pushes the button for the lobby. When she enters the lobby and sees a man behind the desk, she has a moment of panic, thinking she might be stopped and interrogated. She doesn't believe it is against the hotel's rules for a guest, even a young accompanied woman, to leave the hotel room and go for a walk, but just in case, she quickly plans what she will say. She has a headache and needs to get some air. The men do not question women who say they're in any kind of pain, as this could be an indirect reference to their menstrual cycles. And the man behind the desk looks up and sees her, but he makes no attempt to stop her. Outside, the moon, which is almost full, shimmers on the surface of the sea. The air is brisk for May, and there's a gentle breeze. Minou's rufush and headscarf flap around her as she walks, but the sensation is pleasant. The moon's reflection draws her forward, and she aims directly for it, then realizes that the light is everywhere at once, dancing all across the water. She sees no toxic bubbles and smells no foul odors. Guided by the moon's light, she moves down the shoreline until she comes to the men's section of the beach, which is not enclosed by a fence. The hotel is some distance away, and there is no one else about. As soon as she realizes she's alone, she knows exactly what she wants to do, and she does not hesitate. She strips off her headscarf, her slippers, her rupush, and her pajamas, and deposits them on the shore. Then she walks, naked, into the water. The water encircles her, caressing first her ankles, then her knees, then her inner thighs, then her breasts, then her shoulders. Finally, she submerges her full head under the sea until she feels her hair floating on the surface. She's never learned to swim, but her arms know what to do. She moves them with the rhythm of the waves, buoying her body and propelling it forward. Every part of the body comes alive. Unafraid, she plunges deep below the surface again and again like a fish. Each time she rises for a breath, she whispers, "Ah, ah."
Sign. Skinny dipping in the Caspian Sea. I've never done it, but
Okay, last slide, just to close. So these are some pictures from the women's movement. The one on the upper right hand, that's pretty recent. Unbelievable. A young woman went stripped down to her underwear in front of the university in Tehran and walked down the street, okay? And I don't have an update on her. Last time I looked, she had not been heard of from since. So I have no, she's probably in prison somewhere. Fast from the Women Life Freedom Movement, cutting hair became a symbol of protests. It's also something that women in Iran do when they're mourning, but all over the world, women were cutting their hair in solidarity with Iranian women. Right there, that's Nargis Mohammadi. She was the Nobel Peace Prize winner from 2023. She has languished in prison. She's been in and out of prison for many, many years. She's currently out on medical leave, but she's supposed to be going back in at any time now. She's amazingly brave. She organizes women within Evin prison, probably the worst prison in the world, and she organizes them and continues to stand up. And then that's also the Women Life Freedom Movement. So my closing comments are, you're talking about what can we do. We don't have to worry about being, targeted by tanks, I don't think. And we don't have to do little things like skinny dipping. We can do better, right? So let's do it. Let's go right now. I'm just kidding. Anyway,
thank you, everyone.
sí que